name is Steven Osborne, and I'm going to talk about Britten's Piano Concerto, a piece I've played a number of times over the years. It was premiered in 1938, very febrile time. Hitler had recently annexed Austria, and in the piece there are some echoes of the militaristic fears of the time, and the last movement in particular, which is a march. It develops into something very aggressive at times. But the piece as a whole has 4 movements, and it doesn't have pretensions to be some grand concerto. The 4 movements are essentially character pieces. The first is a toccata, which is very brilliant. Lots of octave things going together with the hands. All this kind of stuff, lots and lots of it. You can tell from it what a good pianist Britten was, because it all lies very well under the hands. The second movement is a waltz. The third movement is very interesting because he fundamentally changed it after the premiere. Like a number of years later he came back, and the original movement starts like this. And so on. What he replaced it with starts like this. Fundamental reimagining of the function of the movement and the reimagining of the material. Well, just creating something new. There is a little bit of the movement which survives, and I can understand why, because it's absolutely gorgeous. It goes something like this. Kind of little music box waltz or so. So the original version of this movement is very disparate, and there's a bunch of different sort of mainly different kinds of dance or have linking passages between, and the effect is going kind of all over the place in different characters. What he replaced it with has much more of a feeling of an organic shape, and because the piece as a whole is rather disparate, this replacement with a movement in the middle which is more organic is kind of a master stroke, because it somehow helps to tie the whole piece together. It has this sense of gravity to it. And then, as I said, the final movement is a march, which has quite some savagery in it as it develops. And almost at the peak of the savagery near the end, it just suddenly snaps and then goes at breakneck pace towards the very end. It's a very fun piece to play. It's a very fun piece for the audience. It's very impressive. It's very colourful. As always with Britten, his sense of orchestration is so beautifully imagined and so clever in the use of instruments and the balancing of different sonorities against each other. So it's interesting that even though Britten was a great pianist, one of the greatest of the century in a way, when you hear his chamber music recordings, he didn't write very much for piano. So there's this piece, and there are 2 other pieces for piano and orchestra, and a little bit of solo piano music. He said that he didn't particularly like the sound of the piano, but I think it might be more than that, that when he writes for piano, he has this tendency to go towards, you could say, these rather stock-and-trade figures, that kind of pianistic cliches. And it could be that he just found himself slightly trapped in this whole virtuosic language that has accumulated over the decades. It might also be that it just wasn't quite in Britten's nature to be up front, as the main focus of attention as a performer. So in his performing career as a pianist, he was much more a collaborative pianist than a solo pianist. And so maybe these vehicles for virtuosity in the end felt to him not the kind of centre of his musical personality, and that might be why he left them behind. So all these solo works were written relatively early in his composing career.